A dark hallway. The air is heavy with silence, yet a faint sound pierces the gloom, a child's cry, echoing as if trapped between worlds. From the ceiling, black hair drapes downward, moving as if alive. Something unseen watches you, waiting. This is not a nightmare, not entirely, and it is not just a story. Somewhere in Japan, the echoes of hatred and sorrow have taken shape long before cameras ever captured them. But what is Ju-on? A ghost story? A film franchise? Or a curse that has always existed, lurking in the corners of ordinary homes, waiting for someone to awaken it? Tonight, we step into the darkness behind Ju-on, the curse born of rage, grief, and betrayal. From its first appearance on Japanese television, to the terrifying silver screen adaptations, to Netflix's modern reinterpretation, every retelling draws from the same chilling truth. Some curses do not end. They linger, they grow, and sometimes they reach out to you. Dare you discover the origins of Ju-on? If so, step closer, but beware. Once the curse is known, it never truly leaves. In 1999, Japanese director Takashi Shimizu introduced the world to a story that would haunt generations, Ju-on. It first appeared as a segment in the TV special Gakko Kaidan-ji, a series of eerie school ghost stories. Viewers met the earliest incarnation of Kayako and her son Toshio, the restless spirits whose rage and sorrow would come to define the curse. Even in this short television format, the horror was palpable. Kayako's jerky, unnatural movements, Toshio's hollow stare, and the sense that something unseen was always just behind the next door. The TV version shocked audiences at the time. Unlike conventional ghost stories, Ju-on didn't rely on dramatic plot twists or gore. It was the lingering, invisible tension, the inevitability of the curse, that unsettled viewers. In a country already fascinated by supernatural tales on VHS and late-night television specials, Shimizu's work stood out. It captured a fear that felt intimate yet impossible to escape, laying the foundation for what would become a cultural phenomenon. From this modest TV special, the story quickly expanded. The V Cinema releases of 1999-2000, the full-length theatrical films starting with Ju-on, The Curse, and the subsequent Grudge sequels, all built upon the original concept. Each iteration preserved the essence of the curse, hatred and sorrow that cannot be contained, but explored it in new settings and with heightened intensity. By the mid-2000s, Ju-on had crossed borders, eventually inspiring Hollywood remakes and international recognition. The timeline is complex, but we can see the progression. First came the TV special, then the V Cinema releases followed. Next were the Japanese theatrical films. Later, the story reached Hollywood, with American adaptations. And most recently, the Netflix series explored the origins. Each version builds on the previous one, yet all remain connected to that original spark. A curse born from human emotion, impossible to escape, and impossible to forget. Ju-on, from origin to expanded horror. It began not with a scream, but with silence. A small home in Tokyo, the Saniki house, where rage and sorrow birthed something unrelenting. When Kayako and her son Toshio died violently at the hands of Takeo Saeki, their suffering did not vanish. Instead, it lingered, festering, becoming a curse. A curse that clung to the walls, seeped into the floorboards, and reached for anyone who dared step inside. The first telling of this story came not to cinemas, but to Japanese television. In the late 1990s, Ju-on began as a humble TV special. Audiences were introduced to the rules of the curse, that it does not rest, does not forgive, and above all, does not stay confined. In this earliest version, we see ordinary people, schoolgirls, caretakers, neighbors, each pulled into the same web of despair. The house did not discriminate to whoever entered, binding their fear and death to its growing presence. The story did not end with televisions. Soon, Ju-on spread to V Cinema, direct-to-video releases in Japan, that allowed the curse to take deeper, darker form. These films expanded the rules. Those who entered the house carried the stain with them. Those who merely touched the victims found themselves marked. Even the curious, the well-meaning, or the unsuspecting could not escape once they had crossed paths with the curse. Here, we saw how the Saeki spirits were not just bound to their home, they traveled. Kayako's crawling figure appeared in places far from the house. Toshio's pale eyes watched strangers who never even knew his name. The curse became a living chain, linking victim to victim, with no hope of severance. By the early 2000s, Ju-on stepped onto the big screen. The theatrical films wove together multiple timelines and overlapping stories, showing how the curse-infected lives like a spreading plague. A social worker visiting a client, a real estate agent entering an empty property, a caretaker doing her job. None realized they were walking straight into doom. The house was not just a setting, it was a trap. Every corridor, every doorway, every shadow whispered that escape was impossible. What made Ju-on different from other horror was not the deaths themselves, but the inevitability of them. There was no exorcism, no charm, no ritual that could erase it. Each death only birthed the next, and every survivor was merely living on borrowed time. When the siren of despair sounded, the sound of Kayako's death rattle, time seemed to stop. Victims would look over their shoulders, knowing before they saw her that she was there. Crawling, dragging, waiting, and always, Toshio's silence nearby. His presence, not an escape, but a warning. What began as a Japanese TV ghost story soon became an international phenomenon. The curse of Ju-on crossed oceans, spawning American adaptations, and terrifying a new generation of audiences. But no matter the language, no matter the format, the core truth remained the same. Ju-on is not about who enters the house. It is about the fact that once you are touched by it, you will never leave. The Saiki house is not simply haunted. It is hunger itself. Ju-on. From fictional curse to real-life horror. The legend of Ju-on, the curse born from rage and sorrow, began with the tragic story of Kayako and her young son Toshio. Once killed in their home, their anger and grief lingered, creating a curse that followed anyone who entered the house. Ju-on is a story of inevitability. Once touched by the curse, there is no escape. The fictional Saiki house, with its endless corridors, twisting shadows, and relentless haunting, became a global symbol of psychological horror, one where death and despair are inescapable. But sometimes, reality can be as horrifying as fiction. In 1988, in Nagoya, Japan, a young pregnant woman experienced a fate that echoed the fear and inevitability of a Ju-on story. Though in this case, it was no supernatural tale, but a real-life horror beyond comprehension. The Nagoya pregnant woman case. On the afternoon of March 18, 1988, in Tomita Town, Nakagawa Ward, Nagoya, Japan, a 27-year-old pregnant woman became the victim of a brutal and unresolved murder. She was expecting her first child with her husband, and their lives were described as ordinary, yet full of hope. But that day, everything changed, and the horror that unfolded remains deeply unsettling. That morning she followed her usual routine, seeing her husband off to work. Her due date had already passed, and her husband called to check on her throughout the day. Around 6:50 p.m., a call went unanswered. Concerned but not alarmed, he returned home at 7:40 p.m. and noticed something was off. The usually locked door was open, the lights were out, and from the living room came the faint cry of a baby. He assumed the child had been born, but when he switched on the light, he found his wife lying motionless, and the newborn crying at her side, still attached to the umbilical cord. The telephone was missing. Panic-stricken, he borrowed a phone from a neighbor and called emergency services. When paramedics arrived, they were confronted with a horrifying scene. The woman's body was bound, blood everywhere, and her abdomen cut open. Inside, instead of her child, lay a telephone receiver, a telephone cord, and a Mickey Mouse keychain. The newborn was in critical condition, suffering from cuts and hypothermia, but thanks to quick medical intervention and blood transfusions from the child's grandfather, the baby survived. The mother, tragically, did not. Case analysis and theories. Theory 1. A familiar perpetrator. Police initially suspected the husband, but he had an alibi. He was still at work around the estimated time of death, approximately 3 p.m. His calm behavior, pouring wine for his deceased wife, raised suspicions, but further investigation revealed a female friend had visited the apartment earlier and left the door unlocked, providing a possible entry for an outsider. Theory 2. A professional killer. Some theorized a professional assassin was involved. The crime scene left almost no evidence, apart from a size 38 shoe print, and the abdominal incision did not match standard medical procedures, ruling out a medically trained assailant. Suspects and witnesses. On the day of the murder, a man in his early 30s visited a neighbor on the first floor, asking if they knew the victim's husband. 2 elementary school students reported seeing an unidentified man wandering nearby around 4:30 p.m. The suspect was described as 37 to 38 years old, 175 centimeters tall, wearing a black long coat and a light brown beret, hands in pockets, with the collar raised to obscure his face. Another sighting occurred the previous evening, around 7 p.m., near the crime scene. Symbolic or ritualistic actions. The placement of the telephone receiver, cord, and keychain inside the victim's abdomen has led some to speculate a ritualistic or symbolic intent. Interpretations liken the objects to elements of the womb, the receiver representing the placenta, the cord, the umbilical cord, and the keychain as a stand-in for the child. Horror in reality. This case is not only shocking for its violence, but also for the sense of inescapable dread it produces. A pregnant woman murdered. A newborn left wounded yet surviving by chance. Human cruelty and chance collide to create a scene as horrifying as any fictional curse. Much like the fictional Ju-on, the aftermath of this crime leaves a lingering sense of unease, a haunting echo of rage, sorrow, and irrevocable loss. After the case, the surviving family, father and child, relocated overseas, and the boy reportedly remains unaware of the circumstances surrounding his birth. Some fears exist not just in stories but in reality. Would you dare to confront the darkness of human nature? Subscribe to explore more unsolved and chilling true cases.